Welcome to my show. It's a guest here. His name is Matthew Hayden. Mr. Matthew, how are you doing, sir?
I'm going great. Tammy, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew. Firstly, you are a transformation coach. Can you please, Mr. Matthew, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Mr. Matthew?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, my work as a transformation coach is really being built on my own journey. The work that I try to be able to do with my clients is to be able to help them through their own processes, to be able to get them aligned with their more authentic selves, to be able to create a life that they want.
That is very, very inspiring. What a lovely one. Thank you so much, Mr. Matthew. And from the experience you've had as a coach, have you written any book, Mr. Matthew, or are you planning to write any book in the coming future, Mr. Matthew?
I have not written any books, but that is definitely something on the cards. I'll probably wait for my kids to grow up a little bit more, so I can have a little bit more time on my hands. But definitely in the near future.
Definitely, we'll definitely be expecting that, Mr. Matthew. I would like to dive to the point of purpose. Purpose is one of the most important things that we need
Mm.
because before someone needs to find his purpose, there are also definitely things one needs to also work on him or herself. So, what do you think finding one purpose really mean, Mr. Matthew? And why do you feel or why do you think many people struggle with it today, Mr. Matthew?
Good question. I think that the word purpose, it does get thrown around a lot, and I feel that because of that, it can lose its meaning. People hear it and think that they need some big dramatic calling to just show up out of nowhere. But in my experience, both personally as well as working with my clients, purpose isn't something that you necessarily find, it's something that you build. And often the work isn't about chasing some grand purpose. It's about learning how to create a life that actually feels good. It starts by getting honest with where you're at. It's really easy to get stuck in these loops, staying in roles that no longer feel right, or saying yes when you really want to say no, pushing through relationships or environments that drain us, and we rarely stop to ask the question, what is it that really brings me joy? What is it that gives me energy? What do I actually care about? It's something that I struggle with. I used to be in the Royal Australian Navy a long time ago, and after I left for such a long time, I felt like that I was just going through the motions. I didn't feel connected to what I was doing. I just knew that I wasn't happy. I didn't know what else was out there. Eventually, I started to ask that question about what is it that gives me joy? What do I found joyous in all of the roles that I've ever had? And for me, what came up was working with people and helping them grow, creating change. And that led me into a 15-year career in learning development, which of course now that's again changed my journey and I've created my own coaching business. And to be honest, it didn't all click at once. I think that each step that I took, it started to feel a little bit more aligned. So for me, purpose wasn't just one lightning bulb moment. It was built through small aligned actions that felt true.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Machi. Many people do have this issue, and I think what definitely usually normally cause this type of issue is people look at what other people, tell them to
Mm.
do, or look at outside expectation, or see what is going on outside. When they see that this thing is moving outside, then they just want to join the trend. I think that is what
Mm.
normally usually cause things like this. We have to know what works for us, and what
Mm.
usually makes us happy. What keep us on bed and make us to be more motivated every single day we are doing such thing. So that is a very, very big insight. Thank you so much, Mr. Matthew, for that insight. And I also like to dive to some warning signs. Some people will be living in a very shaped life, but what do you think are some warning signs that one is living a life shaped
Mm.
by other people, other people other
Mm.
than ourselves? Like, what do you think are the signs? And how do you think one can definitely take that ownership back and live authentically, Mr. Matthew?
Mm. Absolutely. I think that some of the warning signs that I felt, through my various careers is feeling bored or resentful or constantly exhausted. For me, that was a pretty big red flag. I didn't see it until it was probably too late. Especially if on the surface, if everything seems fine, you might be ticking all the boxes. You've got the job, you've got the income, you've got the structure, but you're waking up every day dreading the next 8 hours. That's a sign that something's off. I think that another one as well, is when you do have those successes, but you don't enjoy it. It feels more hollow. You might have achieved the promotion status, but instead of feeling proud or fulfilled, it feels more flat. And it's kind of like that you're chasing someone else's goals, living someone else's life. And then of course there's that subtle feeling that you're performing. You're constantly managing every day or how you show up to be the version of yourself that other people expect. It's rather than one that feels natural to us. It's something that I see a lot of this in clients, that, we inherit a story of who we're supposed to be, and we live inside that story for years, even if it doesn't fit. I think that, a life shaped by others is one that you have to constantly maintain. And a life shaped by you, that's one that fuels you, even when things are hard, because you want to keep showing up for it. You know? But then again, it doesn't mean that you have to throw everything out the window and start all over again. You know, I see a lot of other people who want to start their own business, that they've got an idea of what they want to do. It doesn't mean that they, have to quit their job straight away. It's something that you can continue to be able to keep working at it. You don't have to quit everything. You can constantly work at it in the background, purposely.
I definitely completely agree with you with that, Mr. Matthew, because this life that we are living in, if the body is not interested in that thing we are doing, if we are doing it in terms of what we saw other people doing or what we
Mm,
see outside, it definitely tends to tune the body down. The body starts to just feel flat. The body starts to
mm,
feel like it doesn't even feel like it wants to do it more. Even when someone is even getting the achievement, getting the upgrade, that feelings is not there. It will look empty. And that is the
mm,
issue. That is why following what really motivates, what really drives us every single day, even as little as the achievement is, we are definitely seeing the happiness. We are definitely seeing the proudness. And no matter how small it is, we are definitely seeing the motivation that comes within it. That is what motivates us every single day. And that will definitely make that person have nothing or no reason to
mm,
give up or stop or quit what he or she is doing. So it is very, very important. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. I would like to dive to the point of childhood, Mr. Matthew. Do you
mm.
think childhood also, do you think it plays a role in curiosity play in discovering one purpose? Mr. Matthew, during childhood, we always do a lot of things that we never imagined. So do you think
Mm.
childhood also play a role, Mr. Matthew?
Absolutely. I see this every day with my two boys. They're 4 and 7, and the way that they explore life, the way that they ask why over and over again. It's they're themselves, they're living authentically. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're just curious about how things work. And I love how they just get absolutely absorbed into whatever it is that interests them. I think for me, that's the clue. Somewhere along the way, us adults, we stop doing that. We start worrying about what's practical or what's acceptable, what looks good. And what we forget is what it's like being lit up by something for no other reason than we love it. And that's why I get my clients to look back. I get them to remember what did they used to do when they were kids and they lost track of time. You know, what were they drawn to before someone else told them to be more realistic or to be more responsible? That kind of curiosity, that raw, unfiltered kind, for me, that's what often holds clues into what we value most. Rediscovering purpose isn't always about building something new. Sometimes about returning to what you already know, before the world started shaping us. And I think that word curiosity as well, that's what helps me as a coach. That's helps me to be able to be curious, with my clients' lives, to be able to try and uncover those truths and what it is that they really enjoy. Because yeah, along the way, we stop asking those questions.
Completely. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. That means childhood is very, very powerful. And that is one reason I think or I feel that we have the technology today because definitely in those childhood time, we could definitely have a camera that would definitely, see what the child are doing. Then definitely in the future, if they are feeling like, I don't get it, I don't get it, because they see what you do when you are young. Then you do things
Mm.
like this that are very beautiful. It could tune that person back to say, it seems that would definitely work for me. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. I would like to dive to the people that have definitely find their purpose and they are now building it. They are being motivated. But definitely, there might be some people who want to come in the middle and probably sabotage or even try to define that person. So, how do you think you can recommend someone or a very healthy boundaries with people who definitely want to define us, Mr. Matthew?
Yeah, no, that's another great question regarding boundaries. And to be honest, it's something that I probably started to struggle with myself. It comes up a lot with my coaching as well. When people or an organization tries to constantly define who you are or how you show up, it's normally more about them more than it is you. I used to think that setting boundaries that meant that I had to be cold, or distant. But what I've learned is that boundaries are actually a way of protecting your energy, but also your identity as well. You don't have to explain your choices to everyone. You don't have to justify no with arguing. You're allowed to say that doesn't work for me, and then just leave it at that. I think that if someone reacts poorly to a boundary that you've set, then that tells you more about that other person, you know, than yourself and your worth. You know, for me, the moment that I started setting clearer boundaries in my own life, in work, in relationships, for me, that's when things started to shift. I felt like I had more energy. I felt lighter. I was essentially giving myself space so that I can be more myself. I can be more authentic. You know, Boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about choosing, how close people get under 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 the terms that suits you.
Hmm, definitely, I completely agree with you, Mr. Matthew. When someone definitely know what is right and what is wrong for him or her, then definitely, if someone want to probably, recommend something or say something, it is very, very easy for that person to say, I, I don't think this is going to work for me, and one can just
Mm,
just move on with it. It is not going to be difficult. One have to try to, know the right path with him or her and know how one can say,
mm,
it's like I'm going through the wrong path. It's like I'm diving through the wrong path. And I have to say no about this. I don't think it's gonna work for me. And just let it go.
mm,
It's not that does not mean you should yell or act more
mm,
arrogantly. It is not meant to be like that. They are just diving on their own understanding, the way they feel. So you can just say,
mm,
I understand, thank you very much, but you can have a wonderful day. But you know that this definitely
mm.
would not definitely work for me to dive into a point I will not be satisfied in. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. And I would also like to dive to the point of habits, if there is any, Mr. Matthew, because we are definitely different people. So do you
Mm.
think there are some small but powerful habits that align us with our authentic self, Mr. Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is another one that's going to be different for anyone, or for everyone, I should say. It's for me, there are a few habits that I use myself. It's I like to be able to really set those boundaries. I say no without over explaining. It's but the other important thing for me is I track my energy. So, I do journaling at the end of every day and at the end of every week. I ask the questions about what is it that gave me energy and what is it that took that away. And also spending time alone without a screen, giving myself, some space to be able to think, even if it's just for 10 minutes, that I feel like that helps me be more grounded and more present, for either my clients or even for my family. And I think that the last one is, I've learned to do this over time, which is to follow my instincts, and I think that's a habit that I've had to really, really try hard at making a habit. But, I think that that is what helps me be more aligned, with what I'm trying to achieve for my clients. Because at the end of the day, it's, yeah, yes, I have a business, but at the end of the day, I'm helping my clients uncover what it is that they want to be able to achieve, or what the goal is that they want to be able to truly serve them.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. Definitely, if someone definitely know, those things that definitely, make them happy and make them sad, they
Mm,
will definitely know the parts they need to just try to work on and definitely try to improve. Because after maybe probably a week or a month, I feel like, what do I think I did that really made me happy? What do I think that I did that really made me feel not worthy? Then that person can
mm.
definitely know, okay, let me dive through this path, let me do it this way. And that will definitely bring so much development in making someone to live his own authentic or our own authentic self. Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. Lastly, Mr. Matthew, I would like to dive to the point of advice, if there is any, Mr. Matthew. Some people might feel like they feel lost. Some people, even currently now, they might be listening and they feel like they are not in the right path. They feel like they don't know what they should do. So, what advice do you think you have for someone who feels lost and also is disconnected from their true self, Mr. Matthew?
Absolutely. I think that, first off, feeling lost, what it doesn't mean is it doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that something's broken. I think that's really important. I feel like that it just means that you've simply outgrown a version of yourself, and now that you're in a space between who you were to who you are becoming. And that space, it can be really uncomfortable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because you don't have a map yet. You don't know what to expect. Things that used to fit, that just doesn't really feel right anymore. And the new direction, it's not clear yet. But in saying that, it's about having a bit of a mindset shift. Moving away from it's a crisis, the world's ending, to choosing to think of it as an invitation. It's something I often say to my clients is, what if you didn't need to find yourself? What if you just needed to start choosing who you want to become? Whether it's someone who's just been made redundant from a role that they've had for 10 years, or and they've lost something important, whether it's a relationship or a sense of identity, it's normal to feel angry, sad, confused. I just want to say that those feelings are valid. But I often ask gently about, you know, how are those feelings serving you right now? How are they helping you? And usually they're not. So then I like to be able to create a shift by asking a couple of different questions. It's about, what can I learn from this? What is it that I want more of? Or, what can I learn that I never want to be able to tolerate again? It doesn't mean that it requires a full-blown plan, and I think that's the key. Don't have to have everything laid out in front of you. It just takes one step, and that's all it is. One foot in front of the other. You don't have to have it all figured out. You can just ask, what's one true thing that I can do today that moves me closer to the version of me that I want to become? And that's enough, because from there you build.
Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. Definitely, we do know that there are a lot of distraction in our life today, but that does not mean we should now neglect our true self. Getting to get back to our true self to build it will definitely help because it gives that motive, and it definitely doesn't even put us to the position that we feel down, or even feeling some kind of anxiety when it gets to a time. We definitely feel motivated. So getting to feel in that position would definitely be important. I want to also sincerely thank you for that, Mr. Matthew. Mr. Matthew, there's a question I normally ask during the end of the show. For our forefathers, there are a lot of things that do exist during our forefathers' time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mr. Matthew, what do you think that thing will be, Mr. Matthew?
Hmm. It's a very curious question, Tenny. I think that it's for me. I've heard you ask that same question, and I'm not too sure I have the answer because I feel like life is constantly evolving. The challenges that our forefathers had back in their time is different to the challenges that we're having today. And our challenges our kids are going to have in the future, that they're going to be different to us today. So I think that if there's any one lesson to be able to take from all of this experience is to be flexible. Because I think that if you're able to understand flexibility and learn to be able to adapt to different situations, then that will give you a sense of growth. And for me, that's what personal development is. It's, being aware of where things are at and seeing what we need to be able to do to be able to change, to be able to figure it out.
Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Matthew. We do know that there are a lot of things that do exist during our past, a lot of challenges, which is definitely different from our time today. And in the coming future, it will also be definitely different. We have a lot of things we've learned from the past, and definitely with our time now, there will be a lot of things our future generation will learn from us. So we just hope that things, get definitely becomes better, and having the sense of flexibility would definitely be one tool that could definitely help us. When there's flexibility, there'll be there'll be a lot of things that could come out and could definitely help that person in one way or the other. Mr. Matthew, I want to sincerely thank you for the opportunity and the time you've given me today on speaking on purpose. Someone to find his own purpose and develop it in a way to sense this type of life he or she wants, to feel happy, to feel motivated in the life he or she has come from. Thank you so much, Mr. Matthew.
You're more than welcome. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I love the work that you do here.
All right. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Matthew. Bye.
Thank you. See you, Timmy. Bye.